Quanell, this week on the television, we had two spirited discussions that had tremendous racial overtones, the first one, and undertones, the second one. The first discussion was about Scott Adams, the creator of the Office workplace comic strip Dilbert, that I never found particularly funny, but I never worked in a cubicle. And then undertones, Deion Sanders comments about his preference to recruit quarterbacks that were raised in two-parent traditional households. Now, the Scott Adams comment was in response to a Rasmussen poll that suggested half, I think it was 47% of black Americans either are unsure or disagreed with a statement that it's okay to be white. That is heartbreaking and horrifying if it's a true number, right? But the response to that shouldn't have been Scott Adams's response, which was then to call all of black America a hate group and suggest that we as white Americans, as if we're some collective because of our complexion, should stay away from black America. I think it was stupid. I think it was racist. I disagreed with it. But then you had Deion Sanders say on a podcast of the Super Bowl, I think the Rich Eisen's podcast, that he only recruits quarterbacks that are from traditional two-parent households. And he went on to say that he wants defensive or offensive linemen that are trying to save their mama that are from single-parent households. Now, if a white coach would say it, many people agree that that would come across as racist because of huge disparities in two-parent households in black America. I don't think Deion was racist. I do think Scott Adams was racist, but I'd love to hear more of your thoughts.
I believe that Mr. Adams, his response to what I believe was a set-up poll by Rasmussen, who I believe should be ashamed of themselves, because that poll, in my opinion, was designed to drive a deeper wedge between black and white people in this country. That poll, and I believe the questioning of those that they call, was in such a manner it confused those who were giving answers from black community and black people about our view on white people. Black people don't have a problem with white people. We have a problem with white supremacy. We have a problem in a doctrine and an ideology and a political philosophy that says your skin color determines your level of success and access in this country. We have a problem with that. We have a problem with police officers who racially profile young black men and violate their human and constitutional rights and send many to the graveyard and to jail under trumped-up charges. We have a problem with that. You cannot have a problem with the color that a person is born into this world, because God determines that and God allows that. Rasmussen should be ashamed, because what they're attempting to do is to take people and scare white people. That black folks, half of us don't want to be around you. Half of us don't like you. So now this poor cartoon character, he goes and makes some crazy outlandish statements out of fear himself, because he's saying if they think like that, then we should stay the hell away from him, because he's afraid. Charles, that poll was a setup, man, to drive a further wedge between black and white people in this country. And I would challenge them on release the questions and how you raised those questions. And I hope you recorded some of it so we can hear how you spoke to those who you took those answers from. Deion Sanders, our brother, who's now the head football coach, the new coach at Colorado University, he said that historically, when it comes to recruiting quarterbacks, he likes to go after black quarterbacks in particular who come from two-parent households, male and female. Because the quarterback is normally the face of the franchise, the face of the team, and the leader of the team when it comes to leading and mobilizing and pushing and motivating men. He believes, like I do, in order for a young black male to grow up understanding how to properly lead other men, how to motivate and stimulate other men, how to take the emotional strength and spiritual oneness of men and bring that together in unity for greatness on the football field, he needs a man to teach him that. And so Deion is right. We do need more men to be involved in these athletes' lives. Do you realize that it's a statistical fact that at least half of the young black men that are going to prison are coming from homes where they never had any relationship with their fathers? So you take a black athlete he's had that kind of relationship only with his mother. And a woman loves her child as best she possibly can. She raises him with the best she possibly can, but a woman cannot teach that young man what it is to really, genuinely, internally, spiritually, psychologically, and emotionally to be a man. You got to have men to do that, Charles.
I disagree with the position vehemently that Rasmussen was trying to drive a wedge or create this false perception that many members of Black America don't like white America. In fact, I would suggest that Rasmussen instead was just trying to conduct a poll. They conduct a variety of polls, and they just asked people legitimate questions. Polling can obviously be intentionally skewed, but it was a pretty straightforward question. Do you think it's okay to be white, right? And a pretty straightforward response from most, the majority, I think 53%, said, yeah, of course it is. But another 47% suggested that they weren't sure if they agreed with that or strongly disagreed. That's horrifying, as is racism and bigotry of yesteryear is horrifying. But we have a great many very loud voices in the media, in the Democratic Party, the professional grievance committee, people that make a living off saying but we literally have people that are arguing that it is bad after 50 years of affirmative action, that it's as bad in America today as it was during Jim Crow, or the absurdity that race relations are as bad in America today as they were during the horrifying institution of slavery. Of course, things in America are better, right? But we have now monetized this grievance and monetized the divide, and both parties, the Republican Party, which just panders to whites and does a lot what Scott Adams does, which is trying to fearmonger, and they did it for decades. Before it was the Democrats, but then they kind of switched teams. Of course, the Democrats were behind Jim Crow and, behind this, Robert Byrd.
Brought it into existence. Right. Former Klan leader Robert Byrd.
Right. So, you can't just label one party, and that's the problem with America is we see everything as a binary. And we've got to this new era of this racial binary where it is okay to demonize white people for a number of people. There's a redheaded white professor at the University of Chicago right now teaching a class called The Problem with Whiteness, right? Could you imagine a professor at an elite top 5 college in the world teaching a class that said the problem with blackness? Of course you could.
Well, wait a minute. No, it depends what he was saying.
Was it she? What do you mean it depends what she's saying? That's the whole problem.
There is
she's
a problem.
The problem with whiteness.
There is a problem with blackness in America. There's a problem with the way blackness has been taught to black people and the whole world about blackness. There's a problem with that. Because in America, let me finish.
Okay.
In America, black people were told and taught systematically to hate ourselves for the broadness of our noses, the thickness of our lips, the texture of our hair. And we was told that we had bad hair, but white people had good hair. We were taught in America that because of our skin color for hundreds of years, that we were 3/5 of a human being. We were taught in America because of our blackness, we couldn't go to school with white children. We couldn't eat in the same restaurants with white people. So the way that blackness has been taught in America, there is a problem with it. So if a white man teaches in a classroom the problem with blackness in America and he tells the truth and puts it in context, I ain't got no problem with it. So the white Chicago professor is teaching a similar class about the problem with whiteness.
No, she's not.
If it's being based, if the professor is basing the problem with whiteness as the root of white supremacy to whiteness, then she has a point. But if there's a problem just being white, that ain't right. That's wrong. But in what context is she teaching it? I'd be interested in knowing that.
Well, it's this parsing that you're doing that is exactly the point that I'm trying to make, right? It's not okay to teach a class that says, hey, there's a problem with all these people of this racial demographic. It's incredibly pandering for a white person to do it too, because in academia right now, the way to succeed in academia is to condemn white people. And then the response is much like yours. Oh, well, I said white people, but I didn't mean all white people. I just meant the bad ones, which of course is the same thing that racist white people used to say in the 70s and 80s when they would get caught saying a horrible pejorative. They're like, oh, well, I said that word, but I don't mean the good black people. It's disgusting bigotry. And see, it's your parsing that I'm talking about. It's not okay to condemn any group of people based on their immutable characteristics. What it's doing is robbing people of their individuality. When you talk about...
But America did that, Charles.
America did it.
But America did that, Charles, for hundreds of years.
It wasn't over 100 years
But wait a minute, though.
Wait a minute,
Charles. When was it changed, though, Charles? For hundreds of years, the 3/5 compromise was taught to a nation of people.
Of years.
live.
The country
Charles,
started in 1776.
Slavery went on for 300 years.
Slavery ended in the 1860s.
For 300 years.
Then Jim Crow.
For 300 years. And then
we weren't a country.
But Charles, the culture of the country had already been established. So I'm saying this. Take Sam Houston, right? We teach our children in school how great Sam Houston is right here in Texas. But we don't teach our children that Sam Houston was a slave owner. We don't teach our children that Sam Houston hated black people, and one of the main reasons why he went to war with Mexico, because Mexico had outlawed slavery and did not want to practice in Texas. See, we don't teach that. We don't teach our children that Abraham Lincoln, who quote unquote freed the slaves, went on to say that their disturbing presence among us is not wanted, and that no black person should be allowed to intermarry, sit on the jury, be a school teacher, and that they should be repatriated back to Africa because of their painful presence among us. They deceived us into believing that he did it because he loved us out of a moral consciousness, when Abraham Lincoln only freed us because we were to help him win the war against the South, because he was losing the war and he wanted to swing the tide back to the North. So he used the slaves with the freedom card and then said, now help us and we'll give you your freedom. Look, man, Charles, whiteness is not a problem, but white supremacy is.
Firstly, the Civil War was about slavery.
That's a lie. It was about taxation.
The Civil War was about taxation, ending slavery. And you actually sound like Southern white Confederate racists when you parse it. Now, I don't disagree that Abraham Lincoln had some horrible thoughts about black people that are suppressed, right? And we should have much more robust, much more honest conversations about history. We shouldn't engage in presentism and look at everybody through the prism of today. We should recognize these different times. But there were plenty of white abolitionists all the way back to Benjamin Franklin, people that, I mean, there are politicians.
This is true.
That are condemned. Ulysses Grant, he's condemned because he's claimed that he owned a slave, right? In fact, his wife owned a slave, his wife's family, and when he came in ownership, immediately freed the guy. But there are people that say, oh, Grant owned slaves. It was one person, and he immediately freed him. But there were a ton of abolitionists. Why? From the beginning of America as a thought, there were abolitionists, and the Civil War was not, they didn't bring in the freedom of slaves during the war.
They did. It didn't start like that,
Charles. That's not true. You're just lying.
No, wait a minute, Charles.
You tell a little truth,
Charles,
you tell a little lie,
the reason why the Civil War started because the South wanted to succeed from the Union.
The South.
Why? Because the South felt that taxation was so great on them, because the North put it on them, because the North knew that the South had free labor, but not the North.
Wanted to maintain the horrifying institution of slavery.
Because of taxation.
No, because they wanted free labor.
The North went to war with them. Look, our people was not freed by Abraham Lincoln because Honest Abe had a moral change of heart and said, let's do something great for black people, the slaves in America. That's not what it was about.
Do you know any president that did anything for good reasons?
Hello. But let me say this to you. You don't think it's strange why you got Russia and China meeting secretly, and Russia now talking about sending these war apparatus drones that are so deadly it could flip the tide of the war in Ukraine to Russia, and now you see Biden over there visiting Poland, right on the border of Russia and Poland's American ally, and now you see North Korea, another communist country, shooting these missiles, man. You don't think all of a sudden it's strange that Rasmussen comes out with a poll that further divides the American people, that comes out with a poll? No, brothers and sisters, and I'm warning everybody, black and white in this country, during the protest in 2019 and 2020 and 2017 in America, it was discovered that Russian trolls paid by the government was fueling the fire of racial discord in America, masquerading as civil rights activist groups. They even had a fake Russian troll masquerading as me and putting stuff out there to the public that had nothing to do with me. These were Russian trolls, and their sole desire, Charles, was to drive racial rage and to bind even greater to weaken America internally. So when we are at war, they'll try to use our division to help them conquer this nation.
Well, I will agree that we're about to send American soldiers into that conflict. I'm horrified by it. I know personally that we are staging soldiers in Poland. And I think the suggestion that American lives should be lost in another never-ending war is absolutely disgusting. I'm tired of us warmongering, and we've got a lot of blood on American hands, especially for the millions killed in the Middle East in unnecessary wars. It's heartbreaking, right? But I think it's incredibly disingenuous for you to suggest that it's Rasmussen trying to divide America when there's so many people that they make great livings off the grievance, off suggesting that today is worse than yesteryear or even comparable to yesteryear, as if 50 years of affirmative action, 50 years of efforts in trying to change America hasn't had any impact.
Well, one thing that has not changed, Charles, we have to admit, when you saw Brown versus the Board of Education and the overturning of separate schools, separate but equal schools, statistically, Charles, the schools are still segregated in America today. The overwhelming majority of black children still go to school with black children, same thing with whites. And white flight is real, Charles. We cannot deny it. White flight is real. We have too many factual instances across the country where the more people of color move in, the whites are moving out. So we have not fully fulfilled Dr. King's dream on the level that he gave his life for, the real integration of this nation. But I'm telling you, America,
it's better now than it was in the 1950s.
It's not nearly as worse as it was in the 50s. No, it's not. But I will say this to you, Charles. Man, I'm trying to sound the alarm, brother. I'm telling you, and I've been saying this for years. A foreign enemy is very desirous of taking the historical hurt and pain and disenfranchisement of black people and using it against the American people as a weapon for a foreign ally. A foreign enemy that wants to ally with the black community. I watched certain Islamic groups try to do it. Brother, you'd be surprised, Charles. I've had some Muslim Islamic extremists reach out to me over the years, attempting to ally me with their cause in their country and to try to make it look as though black people should be allied with them in their cause inside of America and champion and fight for their cause in America, when I know really they don't give a damn about us. But I'm telling you, Charles, I'm warning you now. Remember I said it's sitting right here on this chair with you, man. You have America's enemies that wishes to use the racial divide to bring down this country.
Okay, I don't disagree with that concept, but I think the power of that right now, the driving force of ripping America apart, is politics and money and media clicks, right? For years, we had media that loved to use the term thug as coded language to insult and denigrate African Americans, right? Now, instead in the media, if there's a white bad actor, a race is platformed and shoved down your throat, and if it's a bad actor of another race, then it's repressed and not addressed, right? Because now the media wants to argue that black America and white America don't need to be together. And then when you hear a racist like Scott Adams say it, it's just in everybody's face. And normal people are like, you know what? Normal people live in neighborhoods. And you talk about
Charles,
white flight. I would argue that it's crime flight, right? People want safe areas. And in areas get unsafe, they move.
But then that's the insinuation that when blacks come in, crime go up.
Okay, but if that's a reality, like there's a lot of reports out of New York, right? There was a report
when poverty comes in, crime goes up.
No, I agree.
For poverty fuels criminal activity.
So we had this report out of New York, tons of media on it, right? That came out that said 90% of the vehicles searched in traffic stops in New York City were Latin and African American, right? And I read a dozen articles. Now, at the same time that was released, crime data was released in New York City, and over 90% of the homicides, the robberies, the rapes, and all violent crime was committed either by Latin or in New York City, by Latin or African Americans, with whites representing like 4% of violent crime, right? But no one contextualizes that in police actions. No one says, and the real problem is where you hear the dehumanization of people and disparities in policing is the war on drugs, is searching regular people, because everyone used drugs, right? The racial numbers for drug use is static across the board. White people use drugs just as much as black people, as Latin people, as Asian people.
More.
Everybody uses them the same. But yet when you're searching cars for drugs, it's overwhelmingly black men and now Latin men. And that's
they put
racist.
The resources of extra police in high crime areas.
But when you talk about other crimes, the media doesn't want to contextualize the city of New York is underwater in violent crime, right? But the problem is that racists will use that data and say, oh, well, like the Scott Adams, well, you should stay away from black people, robbing black people of their individualism. But what the media is doing now is the media is intentionally ignoring that data because they don't want to push false
Charles,
narratives.
You take
what
a
we
normal,
really should have is
take
honest conversations.
You take a normal white person,
okay,
pretty much just in the middle white person, and they see a poll like that, and they say 50% of black people say it's not okay for me to be who I am. 50% of black people in America are not okay with me being white.
But if that's true.
But wait a minute. What do you think that feeds in that person's mind? Especially young people, too. That now makes them think we don't need to be around them. We shouldn't have them around us. They don't like us anyway. When I'm telling you, white people, that's a lie. Half of black America don't dislike you like that. That's a lie. Black people dislike white privilege. Black people dislike discriminatory practices. Black people dislike white supremacy being taught in education, politics, etc. That's what we dislike, and good white people, I believe, should dislike that also. But to think that we just dislike white people because of their skin color, that is a lie. And Rasmussen should be ashamed of themselves for such a silly poll.
See, I think Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, should be ashamed of himself for trying
He's just a fool.
to talk about black people holistically.
But that poll made him pull that mask off.
I think when activists talk about white people holistically, they're doing the same crap, and there's not any pushback or rejoinder. In fact, in America today, he's canceled across the board. But you can see video after video after video of activists talking about white people like we're all scum, and there's no consequence. In fact, there's claps and
let me say
applause.
this. And let me say this, Charles. And I'm going to be clear with you, man. America, how many of us are still going to church now? Dropping lower and lower and lower every year. Now the movement is we don't need many fathers in the home anymore. Women can do it without the fathers. Now the strength of men is just falling lower and lower. Now we're telling men that it's all right to be everything and anything under the sun, that if you want to be a man today and compete in women's swimming tomorrow, that's okay, go ahead and do that there. And you can go from 465 ranked among the men to number 1 among the women, and ain't nothing wrong with that. We're now in a country, man, that says to men that to be strong men, vibrant men, fearless men that stand up for their community and their families, that's toxic masculinity. Now we got a poll saying half of us don't like the other half. Brother, this nation is being pulled in the wrong direction by forces.
Well, right, but I don't think it's China and Russia. I think it's America and our politicians don't want us together. That's the real thing. Right?
I don't think that, man.
If the Republicans and the Democrats are really working together, and it's all about control. And
it's all about money with them.
Well, it's about control and wealth and plutocracy and whatever. But the thing is, if me and you, and I'm just using me and you as tropes.
Every time there's a natural disaster in America, when there's a natural disaster, how many white people and black people come together to help each other all the time?
I think normal white people and black people come together all the time. Think about your neighborhood.
You can go in black neighborhoods sometimes and see a whole group of white folks come in from the outside to help rebuild and repair the dilapidated home of some elderly woman and help clean up black cemeteries. Look, that's what's not being shown. Because I've seen white people in large numbers.
Don't get clicked.
I'm going to touch on something else, man. Do you know that the most unwanted children in adoption agencies are black boys? But you have more white people adopting black boys than black families are doing.
Well, you have a lot of people that say it's wrong. You have a lot of people that argue it's wrong for white people to adopt black kids, which is insane.
It's wrong for us not to go and do something about all of our young black children in foster care and help them children, but somebody else got to go and do from the kindness of their heart what we're not doing from ours. See, that's not what's being talked about, Charles. We got to start telling more of what's happening here. Did you see that story on CNN last week? Is America headed for civil war?
Oh, that stupid Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's just so stupid.
Now, see, think about this, man. Last week, you got CNN running. Is America headed for civil war?
Well, that's what they want.
Fight between the races.
But they want us divided.
Now, then here we come with a Rasmussen poll. Half of blacks don't like whites. Then you got Tucker Carlson on Fox talking about it's a plan conspiracy-wise to create genetic annihilation of all whites in America. Look, man, this is a conspiracy at the highest levels. And what's happening in America, man, is wrong and it's evil, brother. And I'm telling you, man, this is being fed to the American people through media, movies, politicians, radio, social media. It's been designed to create this. Now, hell, you're going to say we had
I think you're giving it too
war.
much credit. I honestly think it's all about money, right? And angry people
promoting
click.
a civil war.
Hold on. Yes, angry people click, angry people view, angry people listen. Normal people, we out living our damn lives. We're not listening to Charles Adams and Quanell X talk about stuff. We're out living our lives, right?
I disagree with you on that one. Normal folks love listening to me. Normal folks love hearing from me. Maybe not you, but they love listening to me.
I was at that Roughnecks game and a guy can't tell how much he loved me. I don't think he loved you, but it's okay.
Well, look where you were, Roughnecks. But anyway.
I mean, it was U of H, an African-American dude, but I don't want to get off. But at the end of the day, the thing is that people that listen to talk radio, and I'm on talk radio every day, people that listen to talk radio are typically angry, right? And the guys that do talk radio, because they're not like me and you, that we have other jobs and we make a good living doing other things, they have to make their living by building that audience. And they do that often by lying to the audience. And right now, the easiest thing to do is say, oh my God, white people, you need to be careful. Or, oh my God, black people, white people are evil. Or, oh this or oh that, because it's for the stupid, right? When you reduce people to their immutable characteristics, when you reduce people to how they look, you don't have to have deeper conversations about what's wrong with America. Right now, what's wrong with America is we have two parties working for the same goals, which is to rob us of liberties, rob us of our money, and give us very little in return. And when you have honest people like Deion Sanders, because we started with Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders, and the story is a white coach couldn't say it, because if a white coach said it, it would seem like he's talking about black America, because you have a higher level of divorce and broken homes in black America, which is, of course, a legacy of poverty, slavery, Jim Crow, and everything. But it is an issue that needs to be addressed. But what really we should be doing as all Americans is saying, hey, we need to be more honest. We need to stop worrying about hurting people's feelings as much. We need to stop canceling everybody for every little thing that's wrong, because people can change, people can learn, people can evolve. But if all they're listening to is people lying to them to tell them in this affirmation echo chamber what they want to hear, then how's anyone going to grow?
I'm going to tell you about a private conversation I had with a white reporter about 2 weeks ago. And I was really going to keep this thing private.
No, spill it.
But let me tell you about a private conversation I had with a print reporter. He called my son, because he's a recruiter for a major university, and wanted to speak with my son, supposedly, but he said, we'd like to talk to your father too. We talked to this recruiter for maybe 50 minutes. He never spoke with my son one time. And I said, my son is sitting here, you can speak to him. He said, no, we want to talk about you. And so he went on to ask these political questions to me. He said, because you're quite famous, and that would be like bringing Donald Trump's son to a black basketball team. And said to me, he said, would your son be a disruption to the locker room because he's your son? He said there was an interesting problem a year or two ago about the song The Eyes of Texas. And he said, if your son was at the university playing for the Longhorns, and they had another issue about the song The Eyes of Texas, would your son be a disruption to the locker room? And you know what I told him? I said, now, you want me to be angry about the songs The Eyes of Texas. You want to talk to me about The Eyes of Texas and expect me to ignore some songs that is teaching young black boys to have sex with young black children. I said, sir, this man went up on stage, our brother Lil Wayne, sir, and got an award because he made a song called I Had Sex with Every Woman and Every Girl in the World. He got that award, but you expect me to ignore that but pay attention to a song called The Eyes of Texas. The Eyes of Texas ain't doing a damn thing to destroy the lives of young black people and facilitating murder and death of young rappers every day in America, but you talking about The Eyes of Texas? Man, look, I'm telling you, Charles, this is a plan, brother. It is a plan to create this racial strife. And I believe that a lot of the money that's being put behind it is coming in from several other countries. I'm telling you, brother, I've watched this thing for years. I've been sounding this alarm, warning African-American Muslims, beware of our foreign Muslim brothers who come to us in the name of Islam, but they really want to use us to create an internal cell in this nation that presents a threat to this nation. And ultimately, they don't care nothing about us. Osama bin Laden, you had black Muslims in America saying, oh, when the World Trade Centers was bombed, Osama, our brother Osama bin Laden, he just stood up against the oppression. Let me tell you something. I had a fool one time say at a rally I was at. He said, Osama bin Laden is our brother, and we stand with him. I went right up there after him and said, let me read something to you. Osama bin Laden said he would never marry a black woman because she wasn't worthy. He said, but for Whitney Houston, he would go against his color rule and take her as a wife, but any other black woman, he wouldn't take her because black women are not worthy. How in the hell you gonna get up here and tell black folks this man is an ally of ours, and that's what he thinks about us? Charles, I'm warning you now, my friend, this thing is deeper than that Rasmussen poll. That's a setup.
See, I think that it's true that there are incentivized people that want to tear us apart, but I think it's the oligarchs of this country. I think it's the plutocrats in Washington, D.C. I think it's the media that has monetized us hating each other, which is why people telling them the truth and people having honest conversations, whether it's Deion, and I do disagree. I think Deion should look at everyone as an individual. I think we all should, and there are plenty of wonderful people raised in single-parent households. But we should talk about problems in society. And the problem is most people now are afraid to because of the potential consequence to their lives. Now, some people, like Scott Adams, they bring it upon themselves. But a lot of people are just worried, heck, if I tweet that, if I say that on Facebook, if I say that on social media, instead of having a robust discussion, I'm going to get canceled. And we need to cut that out. Instead, we need to engage people, especially people we disagree with, and have real talk.
And let me encourage everyone that's watching this debate, please share this debate, because these are the discussions and conversations they don't want the American people to see. But you can help us help this nation by sharing these debates, putting it out there via your social media platforms, and help us push Faceoff. And we thank you for your loyal fan base that continues to watch us every week. We thank you, and we need your help to bring more of American people in this country the awareness of Fox Faceoff and what we do here. Thank you.